Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to be talking about heterotopic ossification in a football athlete. So to start things off, my name is Christopher Cervantes. I'm with Merrimack College in the School of Health Sciences. I'm currently a second year in the MSAT program, or the Masters of Athletic Training program, graduating this May. So the background of heterotopic ossification and what you need to know about this disease, it's defined as a diverse pathological process defined as the formation of extraskeletal bone in muscle and soft tissue. So when you get an injury and you heal, usually tissue of that same type will come in to replace that injured tissue. But in this case, bone replaces that instead of, for example, muscle tissue in a muscle injury. This usually appears in high trauma areas like the elbow, the bicep, pelvis, and the shoulder. It's characterized as local pain, tenderness, or swelling, a rapid increase in size of that extraskeletal bone if it gets too serious. It's a firm and palpable mass, and also a loss of range of motion is usually noted. There's a lot of differential diagnoses that you can see here. If it's not heterotopic ossification, that's things you should think about. There's also diagnostic imaging to verify that this is the case. So usually X-ray and magnetic resonance imaging is used to fully define heterotopic ossification. So this was an interesting presentation in my football athlete just because it was concomitant with a lot of different hamstring injuries. So that repetitive trauma is usually what causes a heterotopic ossification. So this repeated strains of the hamstring is what we believe cause heterotopic ossification. So he was an 18-year-old male Division I football player. It was his first year in the program. He was a tight end, and this position is related with a whole lot of high velocity movements using the lower extremity with a constant acceleration and deceleration, as well as blocking of the other opponents. He was diagnosed with multiple hamstring strains throughout his treatment and rehab, which I noted earlier. And during his second round of medical imaging, he was diagnosed with a small area of heterotopic ossification in his left posterior hamstring. So to manage this, we went over therapeutic exercise and a combination of therapeutic exercise as well as modalities. The therapeutic exercise ranged with range of motion, progressive resistance exercises, balance progression, a functional activity progression, as also as a return to play progression as well. And to stimulate that optimal healing environment for the tissue, we use the range of modalities, including heat, electrical stimulation, effleurage, blood flow restriction as well, and ultrasound. So right here, you can kind of see the management timeline from his first initial injury all the way down to his sample 2 to 3 treatments. The treatments are kind of broken into blocks depending on the initial eval, the re-injury, and the rehab after the heterotopic ossification was diagnosed. So his initial eval, it presented to us as a hamstring strain, which we confirmed with an MRI. He had increased T2 signal in the proximal muscle tendinous junction of his semitendinosus, or a hamstring muscle. It was characterized more of as a partial tear, as well as a strain in the semimembranosus, which is another hamstring muscle. So we treated it as such. It was included in his rehab protocol of glute strengthening, quadricep strengthening, when he could be able to, or as tolerated, he strengthened the hamstring, pain-free range of motion, and we also introduced balance and proprioception as well. During this rehab process and his initial return to play, he did re-injure himself. So we got that re-diagnosed as well through medical imaging, through X-rays and MRIs. It showed that a small area of heterotopic ossification did occur in his upper left thigh, in his hamstring area, and the MRI showed a proximal tear at the musculotendinous junction of his biceps femoris and his semitendinosus, which was also noted in the earlier MRIs. So treatment we had to back off of. So after his initial re-injury, we progressed him to a decent amount, but once we learned that heterotopic ossification was there, we brought it back just a little bit. So we introduced stretching, mobility, range of motion, a reintroduction of strengthening when he could be able to tolerate it, as well as stretching, mobility, range of motion, glute strengthening, and hamstring strengthening, as well as BFR as he progressed later in the program. So my initial interaction with him was his initial injury on August 5th. His last day was December 11th. That was my last day of my clinical rotation. And by that time, the athlete was beginning to fully participate in full practice with certain limitations, like 50% of reps, 50% of team, and other limitations just like that. What I assume after I left the clinical setting, he continued rehab and to work on range of motion, strength, and balance, and to get him back to his full 100% participation in the football season.